All right, we could get started.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining People Power Hour. I'm Terrell McKinney, and we got a special guest tonight, Joaquin Fox. How you doing, bro?
I'm well. Thank you for inviting me tonight. I'm happy to talk with you and to see what we come up with.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for just all the work you've been doing all summer. For those who don't know you, can you let them know what you've been doing and your background?
Sure. Yeah. I'm Joaquin Fox. I'm a community organizer. I was the lead organizer on the Don Klein demonstration that happened starting on June 4th. It was a sustained action that took place for 36 days outside of Don Klein's gated residence in West Omaha. And outside of that, we've been on a journey of justice for James. So we've done a couple different demonstrations in partnership with a lot of the other organizers throughout the city, and are most recently conducting a canvassing effort, a citywide canvassing effort to educate the community about Justice for James, what this mission is really for, the role that Don Klein played in denying justice for James, and then what we can expect with the grand jury trial, and ensuring transparency and better equity inside of the criminal justice system in the future. So we were working on a couple different strategies for that process, and then really just building a system of support and care for demonstrators and protesters as we see those different demonstrations happening throughout the city and that have been going on throughout the summer.
That's great. That's great. So what got you into community organizing? Like what was the reason for it?
Yeah, a little bit about background. I have made my entrance into advocacy work and activism through like the nonprofit realm. I started in 2017 as the president of the Urban League of Nebraska Young Professionals Group. And obviously, my heart is really passionate about criminal justice reform, social issues, racial equity. And so we started a lot of advocacy on behalf of our membership of Black YPs. And during that time, I made a lot of partnerships with other nonprofits like the ACLU, Voices for Children, advocacy organizations that were really interested in using the power of nonprofits to have those conversations. And so I built up a real network inside of the nonprofit realm and moved into philanthropy, where I was the program officer for a family foundation in Omaha, and we were giving out $20 million a year to social justice organizations throughout the city. So when we saw what was happening with the Justice for James situation, seeing that Jake Gardner was not booked and not arrested or charged with murder for James Scurlock, it really motivated me to figure out how I could use all of my resources to bring that change that we were looking for, or a different decision. So I started kind of organizing on social media and was able to institute that 36-day direct action because of a lot of the support with community. But Justice for James was really a changing point in my experience with Omaha. I got into advocacy because of obviously Trayvon Martin and how much that impacted a young Black person at the time. To see themselves reflected in that case and to not get justice really motivated me to figure out my place in advocacy work. So obviously, Black people can sometimes mark their life or mark those transitions by the death of other Black people that we see heavily reported in the media, and we see how those different experiences were so similar and really catapult people into that work. So those were the changing points for me specifically, and this latest injustice with James Scurlock really motivated me to get activated in a way that I hadn't before.
I know with me, with the Trayvon Martin situation was the first time I ever publicly did anything like in support of something. I
Yeah.
put the hoodie on, took the picture, and posted it on my social media. And then I had happened to be in St. Louis at the time Mike Brown died. I was still going to school there, so I kind of was living through that, and just those two experiences just was like I know I have my dreams and I want to do all these things, but it's like it's a huge part of me that needs to start moving towards like community because it doesn't seem like much is getting done. And at the beginning of the summer when all this popped off, I was kind of optimistic that Omaha would wake up. I was always hopeful for it, and I was happy to see it the first night when it all happened. And just since then, I've just been in like I've really just been happy to see almost nightly. I scroll, hop on Facebook or Twitter, and some type of demonstration or rally is going on across the city. And I always like tell people like I support it. I love seeing it because I think until now, at least the city of Omaha has always been able to just hide behind it doesn't happen here in Omaha. It's not here. We're perfect, and I'm like, no, we're not. Like these issues are still taking place in our community, and it's just irresponsible to say it's not happening here.
Definitely, I hear you. And again, like I said, like I think these things hit so close to home for Black people specifically, just because we mark our lives by those different deaths that we see, and it's experience that I think is specific to Black people and really changes how we interact with the world and how we have to advocate for ourselves because no one else will do that for us. And so I totally agree. Like, again, Trayvon Martin was a life changing experience for me. And I think in Omaha, we're really unique to how segregated we are, not only in geographically, but in how our interactions happen. Like, we're not side by side physically, and we aren't mentally or socially, and those lines don't get crossed. And so the stories that we tell each other in North Omaha don't make it outside of there because there is no real connection point to those different communities about the experiences that we're going through. And when we do tell those stories, they aren't believed. So I totally get your point about Omaha having that, like, living in denial, and not really understanding what's happening in their city, and purposefully and intentionally so, because we've been split up that way. To a tremendous degree that I think most people don't see.
What was the reaction from the community where Don Klein lives to you guys being out there for 36 days?
There were a ton of different reactions. The most interesting being we were greeted really warmly by the neighbors that were on the corners where we were demonstrating, offered to use their restrooms, get water, all that kind of stuff. And by the 10th day, that that had changed dramatically to the point where racial slurs were used, and threats, and misinformation, and you got to see the niceties wear off really dramatically and very quickly in the neighborhood. But we were greeted with so many different things, like Some people brought their families down because they wanted to have explained like what's going on here. The kids were interested and the parents didn't really have the words, so they brought them down to the demonstrators, and we were able to tell them why we're here and what racial equity meant and what justice for Black and brown people means, when their lives are threatened by white supremacy and the complicity of city officials and police. And so we were able to tell those stories and talk about who James Scurlock was as a father, um, who were there on Father's Day. And we had those signs up like James Scurlock is missing this time with his 8-month-old baby, well, 6-month-old at the time. So we were able to have these different conversations where we were able to educate people on the facts of the case. People wanted to understand like what the grand jury process really was, and we were able to do that education as well. So there was just a ton of misinformation out in West Omaha. We were able to clear it up to some extent with the people that engaged with us, and we also had to defend ourselves from some violently racist people. So we met the gamut of reaction out there. But I think that time was really necessary to build awareness about, again, who James Scurlock really was as a father, a friend, and son and sibling, and what Don Klein's part in all of this was, and what we expected of him, which wasn't just a passing the buck of responsibility to the
Right.
grand jury, but for him to be accountable as an elected official about how we feel as residents in Omaha.
Do you think those people that were nice in the beginning were hoping that if they were nice, you guys would just leave?
I think they were thinking like this is our opportunity to prove like we're not the bad people that people say we are. You know what I
Right.
mean? So, but there's a time limit to that, to when actions are disingenuous. There's a time limit, and you get to see the real face of people as that time lengthens. No one expected us to be there for 36 days. They didn't know what to expect, and so there was like a feeling of surrealness to that, with also like these people had something to prove to themselves and their families. And it doesn't last long when it's not real, you know?
Right. For those who don't know, can you briefly explain the grand jury process and what's going on up to now, if you can?
Yeah, so I'll put it in context with James Scurlock specifically. In 36 hours, Don Klein had decided that Jake Garner was not guilty of any charges, and he actually spent the press conference where he announced his decision not to press charges as more of a defense narrative than an actual like unbiased presentation of the facts. And so that was really disappointing and shocking to so many people, because the purpose of Don Klein and the county attorney is not to think about guilt or innocence, but to collect the facts in an appropriate manner and make a decision that if there is enough evidence for a case for charges to be pressed or not. And so him spending that time defending Jake Gardner showed a clear bias to the decision-making process. It wasn't about guilt or innocence. It was about if there are enough facts. And we know that 36 hours is not enough time to really examine the facts of such a controversial case. And so we wanted him to spend more time with that decision. And instead of doing that, he made a rush decision and then passed off the responsibilities to the grand jury. What the grand jury is anyone that's registered to vote in Omaha can be part of that grand jury process. These are not legal experts. These are regular residents that are pulled together in a private, non-transparent manner. And those are the people that get to make this decision. So we don't know who they are, and we don't know what their biases are either. And there's not that beginning part of the process, like in a regular court trial, where you could talk and figure out the bias of jurors and then excuse them or hold them on, depending on if they can be an unbiased arbitrator of facts. And so that doesn't happen in a grand jury process. They're pulled together, and then there's a special prosecutor appointed to this case. And I apologize, the special prosecutor happens before the grand jury is pulled together because they get to do an investigation. So that's the process that we're in currently. Special prosecutor Frederick Franklin, who's a former prosecutor, in federal court, and a resident in North Omaha, a Black man, will be the special prosecutor on this case. And they're allowed to do a deeper investigation of facts, and then take their time in pulling together that jury. So right now we're in the evidence collecting phase of the grand jury process, and we expect it to last for 1 to 2 more months. This case might not start till December or January, and we really don't know how that case will go, because again, it is such a private and non-transparent process. And so the purpose of the grand jury right now is to do what Don Klein is supposed to do: examine if there are enough facts for charges to be pressed. This isn't even the actual jury that would decide whether or not Jake Gardner was guilty. This is
Right.
just a process to get to the point where if charges should be pressed. We know up until that jury is convened as a body in the courtroom that Don Klein can stop the process and just press charges. He's choosing not to do that because he doesn't want to take responsibility for the outcomes. And so that's why demonstrations still last. That's why 36 days happened. And that's why his name should still be brought up every time we talk about James Scurlock, because he is intentionally skirting the duties of his office. And we find that to be unacceptable. So that's what the grand jury process looks like right now. We're still in investigation. Frederick Franklin has opened a hotline. So if you do have any knowledge about the case, you can call into that, and he's still collecting facts.
I was upset from the beginning with Klein because it just felt like him and his office was doing as much as possible to try to criminalize James and make him not the victim and make him into the
Sure.
criminal and try to make it seem like he deserved what he got, which is not far from the truth. And it's just annoying. It was so annoying because I had conversations with Klein and I was like, so we're looking at the same video and you're trying to tell me that you don't see a crime here taking place. And you can't. And he would just skate around it. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, you, who are you? Like, why are you the prosecutor? Aren't you supposed to be protecting the victim? The victim is dead, but it seemed like you're protecting the individual that killed him.
Definitely. We know that to be intentional. We know that Jake Gardner and his family have ties to police and the city officials. Jake Gardner is a huge Trump supporter. We've seen pictures with him and Trump. We know our city officials are Trump supporters. And we know those ties to police, which is why he wasn't booked in the first place. Which we
Uh,
know any Black person that would use a firearm in public, no matter the situation, would be
right.
immediately arrested. So we know what happens when people aren't um, part of the system, how they get treated. So we can see the intentionality behind all of the actions that led up to Jake being able to go free. And it's really important to look at Don Klein as one of the faces of white supremacy in our Omaha community, and one of the faces of systemic racism, because there's really no benefit to him protecting a murderer. But he's chose to do so in such a fashion that it can't be ignored. And we have to make sure that we're continually pushing for the justice that we seek for James and his family.
And I agree because it's like if me or you would have did what Jay Gardner did, we would have been sitting in the county that night booked on murder charges. And the fact that it didn't happen is just blatant, blatant as can be, that there's a lot of biases in this situation. And that's the frustrating part. Like they stand in front of us and pretend to care. Like honestly speaking, I would rather them come out and say, "I don't care about you people. Uh, I don't care about your like how you feel. I don't care that you want us to do." I would rather them just come out and say it instead of getting on TV and pretending like they're with us and when we know they're not.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's an insult to all of our intelligence to hear Don Klein talk about it being a partner to Black and brown people, and then to
Right.
see him do something like this. And it's similar with all of our officials, like Chief Smarter and Mayor Stothert. They continually tell us that police are on our side, that they care about our issues, and do nothing to resolve them. And that's the real power of white supremacy, is that they can live in that denial and we don't often have the ability to change that. And that was one of the real reasons that I wanted to do an organizing effort, was because like when we really begin to think about our power as people and what it means to apply public pressure to these issues, we see that the floor rises when we're together and really figuring out what our collective demands are and what it means to be a united community. And there's no real way for them to push back on that. We saw them work the hardest that they've ever had to work this summer to defend the police, to
Mhm.
defend their bad decisions, because hundreds of people were showing up to these meetings that they weren't expecting to have to answer to. And we saw dramatic change in the way that they were able to respond to our issues. We saw Chief Smutter not be able to answer real questions about policies. We saw the same thing from Mayor Stothert. And they had to be put on the record because people were showing up in a way that they have not shown up before. And that's the real power of public pressure, of community organizing, is that you get to hold people accountable in a way that they wouldn't have to be if they didn't see our faces in the way that they were. So it's been an exciting summer. Obviously, like the most exciting part of that was seeing the 2 million being requested to come out of the Omaha Police Department. Obviously, that didn't happen because of the threats by the mayor, but we saw people responding to democracy in a way that they always should have, but have never felt the real pressure to. And so we saw them work harder than they ever had to work before. And we want to keep doing that until there's no way around us.
Right. And I always preach consistency. I think for the things that we want to get changed, we have to be consistent in our approaches to those changes. We can't be satisfied with, Jerome just proposing to put 2 million back into the community. Now that the mayor has vetoed it, that means we got to work extra hard to make sure next time around there is a reduction in the budget and more resources are allocated to community. Because it makes no sense to me that this mayor, this police force complains of crime all the time, when when I drive around in North Omaha, all I see is police. Two, you're devoting $162 million to the police force. Whether you want to tell me that's more so for the workforce or whatever, still you're devoting $162 million to policing. But then you giving 20 million to community and telling us that's enough. It makes no sense to me. If you want to prevent crime, wouldn't you rather devote the resources to the prevention instead of waiting for somebody to go out and rob a store or shoot somebody? And that just, to me, it just shows that they don't care to really address those issues. And for members from our community in elected positions to stand up and champion the police and the mayor is really frustrating, because it's like, you're tone deaf. If you're tone deaf, or if you're disconnected, just don't talk. Let the youth talk. Let those in the streets talk. Maybe you should just take a back seat and be an advisor or something. But you don't need to be talking if you're going to talk out of touch and out off base.
Yeah, I think it's really important for us as younger, more progressive leadership to really think about how we quantify our opinion,
Mm-hmm.
because older leaders are thinking through that piece. They are able to say, like, we've surveyed this part of the community, and we've said that we're representing them, so we have that basis. And what's our opportunity to do the same thing and be really intentional and purposeful about how we engage community? Because often we say that we're representing the community, but we haven't quantified that. And that
Mm-hmm.
leaves us open for critique. And so, what does it mean to say, like, we've surveyed these people, we know the real opinion, and we're able to represent that adequately with this information, asking the necessary and relevant questions to today's conversations? Because I'm certain no one has polled North Omaha about whether we would want to defund the police or not. And we might find some interesting information when we do that research. So, how can we start to garner those opinions, have more conversations, make sure that impacted people are leading the efforts that we're engaging in, so that when we do show up, we're showing up with the people that are actually dealing with these issues and are able to speak from their lived experience. And that gives us another opportunity to say, like, the work that we're doing, you haven't done. So you have to bring us to the table because we're able to represent these folks in a way that they haven't been represented before. And again, like you said, we have to be consistent. We also have to be innovative and strategic and really thinking
Mhm.
through like, what are the systems that we're trying to fight? How do they operate? How do we take them down by looking at their weakest point and pairing it up with our strongest point, which is we have the numbers. We have the numbers. We have to quantify that opinion. And when we do present it in that way, they won't be able to deny us because we've done the legwork.
Right. How have if somebody wants to get involved with you and wants to do some organizing training, how do they get in contact with you to start that process?
Yeah, we do a couple different things. So once a month, we do an organizer lab, which is myself and four more other organizers called the Academy of Equity. We do a presentation. It's a half day presentation, so 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we go through all the fundamental steps that you'll need to start an organizing effort. And then we also offer our support so to make sure that you have the necessary resources and that you're able to accomplish your mission safely and strategically. So we do that in-depth partnership as well as the overall training. So those trainings happen on Sunday. Our next one will be the first Sunday of September. So look out for that. And you can always visit down at the Culture House. I work out of here with great partnership from the Culture House and Marcy Yates as the executive director of that on 24th and Work. I'm here every day, so you can come down and talk to me directly if you want some more information, or follow me on Facebook. It's just my first and last name, JAKEENFOX, and I'd be more than happy to talk with you. We do that. And then we also have a canvassing effort, like I mentioned previously, that's going until we reach the entire city. So our next biggest date for community canvassing for Justice for James will be on September 7th. That's Labor Day, Monday. So come down from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. We'll give you a packet and some training, and then we'll do face-to-face conversations about James Scurlock and where we're at with the case.
Okay, that's dope. Um, Another conversation I've been having with people is, okay, we're organized in the streets, but another piece to the protest, in my opinion, is getting ourselves to the polls, getting individuals that are out here in the streets protesting and rallying, transitioning them into, hey, a part of this has to be us electing people and getting people out of office that don't need to be in office, and it has to happen. We have to, it has to be like a multi-pronged approach. It can't be just us in the streets rallying with signs. It also has to be, okay, this DA isn't doing what we want him to do. Next time he's up for election, let's elect him out of office. This city council person isn't listening to us. Let's put somebody in place that'll listen to us.
I hear you. And so, like, my mantra around any system is that, like, I can't tell people what they have to do or
Right.
what they should do, but I can definitely tell you, like, how I think that you can be engaged. So, like, the people that vote are going to vote. And the people that have been disenfranchised by that, it's our job to make sure that we clear the pathway so it's the easiest thing that they could do. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
it's important that if we want more people to vote, that we're constantly working on voting rights issues so that we lower the bar to entry. Because right now it's really high for Black and brown people, and it's really disenfranchising because of all of the other systems that are impacting those same people. So we have to look at voting as an intersectional issue and understand that if people have decided not to vote, we have to hear them, understand why, and then create that clear path so that they don't have that barrier anymore. I think it's really important for the people that do vote to really think about those local issues, or the people that are curious about voting. I think it's important to organize those folks and to understand, like, if you visit this process, if you see city council face to face on an issue that is important to you, and you hear how they talk about that issue, that may inspire you to vote in a way that you hadn't before, because you're seeing, like, who's really being upfront with you as an elected official. You see who's enjoying, like, the work and the listening and the democracy of that, who you can support, and you see who you need to take off. And so as we encourage people getting involved in those processes, they'll maybe start to understand how their vote can be important and how it can be useful to creating a different situation than they've been in.
Right. And I'm like one that I was a person before that didn't feel like voting even mattered to me after a while. Like I felt like what am I voting for? We still in the same situation. So I understand that even now though, although I may want everybody to get out to vote for me, I also understand that's unrealistic and most likely it's not gonna happen. But I think it's key to just plant a seed here and there, like, hey, you know what I mean? And then let people grow because I agree, you can't force nothing on anybody. They're eventually going to see it or they're not going to see it. You just plant the seed and say, hey, this is maybe a reason why you might want to vote. But that doesn't mean if you don't do this, then you're a horrible person.
Yeah, I think once people can start to remove the shaming from their conversations around voting, you might see people
Right.
react and respond to that in a different way. So, what does it mean to hear those folks out? I'm still in that place for a couple different boxes on the ballot. You know what I mean? Like, and so I have to be inspired around that. And that's another thing. It's our job as organizers or candidates or elected officials to inspire people to do the thing that they may not have wanted to do. When Obama got the vote, he got it because he inspired people in a way that they hadn't been inspired before. And we
Right.
saw the turnout of an impressive aspirational candidate. And so I can't blame anyone else around that not wanting to vote, because when people want to, they will, and we see that. And it's
Yeah.
based on the candidate and it's based on the issues. And if we're communicating that properly and if we're actually in community with these folks that we have, then we'll have a better way and a better pathway to persuasion. So we have to make sure that we're doing all of those things simultaneously, or else we're just kind of screaming into the void about an issue that won't get resolved until we make it aspirational for them to be involved.
And I think as an organizer and even as a candidate, it's important to listen to those who say, I don't want to vote because of this, and really listen to them and hear them out. Because a lot of times it's a real reason why somebody will tell you that I don't want to vote or I don't believe in a process. But more times than not, you see people saying, like, oh, you don't want to vote. I don't need to talk to you. Like, I remember I voted just to argue with my uncle. Literally, he told me if I don't vote, I can't argue with him. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna go vote just to prove my point and argue with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it takes different things for everybody, and we
Yeah,
know that one size does not fit all, and we have to be responsive to those personal connections that we have with folks. When you make a personal connection, you're that much more persuasive, and so we see when we see these get out the vote campaigns, and we see them not really succeed in the way that we're hoping for. That's not their fault; it's ours because it's our messaging. If
right.
I'm in a media company and my ad doesn't sell, they don't fire the world. They fire me because it's my job to communicate that appropriately in a way that causes change. So that's our job as officials, as candidates, as organizers, is to make sure that we're sending that message clearly in a way that's engaging.
And it's important to get away from placing blame on the community for not voting in numbers or something. I'm like, if year after year the community is not turning out, then there's obviously some type of issue here. It can't be just people are just deliberately saying, no, I don't want to vote. No, and it's, you still see it to this day to where people are not taking the time to really understand why aren't individuals in these particular communities willing to go out and vote like they probably should.
And we have to understand, like, why isn't anyone having those conversations, and what's the benefit to them, what's the cost to them. So I
Right.
think we have to think about that just as intentionally as we think about other system issues, and the whys, and how and who we're discarding, you know what I mean, and who seems important during this election. As we've seen, a lot of the conversations are catered to white moderates, kind of racist folks that may be on the edge, for a swing for either side. We've seen that messaging be really pointed to those folks as opposed to who will be considered the base of some of these parties. So it's really interesting to look at that, to see why that happens and who they care about the most and how that affects disenfranchisement. So again, it's not the voters' fault or the non-voters' fault. It's how we communicate that message, and if we do it with real authenticity and what's our intent.
What are some things that you think can take place this next election, taking us into 2021, that if people vote, how, like, what are some things that you think may work out in the favor of the people if we do vote how we're supposed to?
Again, like I think the focus has to be local and to see how the local informs the national. I think if people take a good look at our candidates as they show up for local elections, you'll start to see like how those powers of certain offices impact your everyday life. I think that's one of the pieces that candidates and elected officials could do better, is really communicating what are the powers of my office and how
Mhm.
do they affect you as my constituents. A lot of people don't understand what a congressman can do for them locally. A lot of people don't understand what city council is really in charge of and what it means to have a document like the city charter, that dictates how people can create legislation locally. Do people understand the powers of the senators? And how are we communicating those messages so that people understand how important it is to get out that vote for those specific candidates that are putting themselves on the line for those real issues that we care about. So I think it's important to communicate the powers of offices so people can understand, like, do I want this person in charge of how development happens in my neighborhood? Do I want this person that takes money from the police to be able to dictate how the police are impacting my life? Those are important questions that we'll have to ask. And that happens through that real
Mhm.
educational effort. So we have to inspire people around like what those powers are, educate them on what it means to their lives, and then we can see how that turnout will occur. So those are the things that I'm interested in locally, is that communication of powers, and then nationally, like what issues are impacted globally, and how do we participate as global citizens and residents, and what that means to our lives as Americans too. So we have to be really educated on all of those things. I think if we do turn out, I think we start to see ourselves with a voice that we haven't before. We start to see like how our impact can dramatically affect the society. You know what I mean? How our participation here in Omaha has a real impact on what happens in Washington, D.C. And people start to see
Okay.
those real connections when they are part of that process.
What do you? I know justice for James, but what do you hope young organizers are getting out of the engagement that's been taking place over the summer?
My real hope is that people are thinking about the impact that they want to have, and that they're being strategic at all times and creating an ecosystem of care for the people that are volunteering their time and their energy and their bodies for their efforts. So it's really important to understand the systems that you're working against, because again, if you're hitting their strongest point on your first action, you won't see that success because that's where they're dominant. So what does it mean to do your research, to ask questions, to get informed, and be able to knock their weakest leg down and see that power shift? So it's really important that people understand the mechanisms and the tactics of demonstration, public pressure, protest, and how those add value to the people that are doing the advocacy work inside of systems. So, what does it mean for you to pressure something so hard that the person that was fighting for that same thing in the office has more leeway in negotiation room to make things change? And that provides that real, like, public partnership with elected officials, with city officials, so that you're able to see that movement in a different way, and being thoughtful and intentional about your work creates those real pathways to systemic change. So my hope is that people are strategic and that they really create a system of care for themselves so they're not burning out, because this is a long fight, and we obviously we sense the urgency, but we know that old powers are there because they've dug in roots into these systems. They put down roots into these offices, and that's going to be a tough trial to drag it out. But I know we could do it if we're strategic and thoughtful.
Can you speak to the self care that is needed in community organizing? Because I think it gets overlooked. A lot of people just keep going and going and going, and I even find myself like, dang, like I need to take a break sometimes, and being intentional about making sure you make time for yourself to make sure that you can keep going. Because a lot of times you just get caught in just doing and doing and doing and never think about self.
Yeah, I think like one of the things I teach in my part of the organizer lab is that there is a place for everyone inside of the movement, and that organizing work can be life work. So, what you do in your daily life that brings you joy, the skills that you have that you feel accomplished when you're able to finish something, you can bring those things to this community effort, and you can see yourself contributing in the way that you enjoy and the way that you love to building the new world that you hope to see. And when people are able to make those direct connections to like the thing that gives me joy in life is also the thing that can change the world, they start to create a joy in that experience, and it allows them to do more because they're giving from a place of abundance as opposed to a place that feels like a burden. So it's okay if you aren't
Mhm.
necessarily a protester. You don't have to do that action, but there's something that you can do for the movement. If you're a cook, we have activist cooks. They love to create opportunities to show appreciation for folks, and they'll cook whole meals for us. And they just like to sit back and watch protesters eat their food because that's a sense of accomplishment that they get. And they know that they can do that every single day because it brings them joy as much as it brings other people. So if you're able to bring that skill set of whatever that is to organizing work, you won't have the same kind of burnout that you have where you're doing that thing again that feels like a burden. And so you're able to create that sustainable process inside yourself because you're giving from a place of abundance. And then also knowing that if you are putting your body on the line, there are people that will heal your body. And those are part of our community of demonstrators and protesters too. We have healers that do those on-call kind of touches or conversations or therapy because we know that's a necessary and normal part of movement work. Creating a different world is going to be very hard, and you're going to take lumps while you're doing it. So we have to make sure that we're caring for each other and creating those spaces of community, healing, and collective like rejuvenation and renewal, so that people aren't left behind, but that we're continually bringing ourselves back together. So that can happen in a ton of ways, but I think the important way is to join the movement in a way that feels life-giving to you as opposed to a burden.
And I think that's a great point. I think a lot of times people think either you're protesting or you're not, and it's like no, there's honestly multiple roles within the movement that you could be the person that write the story. You could be the person that's taking the pictures or videoing what's going on. You don't have to be in the streets with a sign and your fist in the air. It's so many roles, and I think people that gets lost a lot of times. Something else, and I know the mayor, was speaking out about you like recently this summer. How do you deal with that type of, how do you direct like organizers that say, hey, this is a possibility that if your voice gets loud enough, they'll come for you in some type of way to try to diminish what you're doing? Do you prepare them for that or let them know it's a possibility, or do you just let it happen? Like,
I think that if you're being strategic, like you've examined like what the risks are,
right.
and you've made yourself aware, and you made the people that could be impacted by that aware as well. So um, when I make statements or comments, like importantly, like again, like you shouldn't be a different person in your organizing work. Like, if you're
Yeah.
being authentic and honest, like who you are is who you bring to that space. So no one's surprised when Joaquin makes a dramatic or controversial statement, because like I was doing that before I was part of the organizing movement.
Yeah.
And so I brought my same self to this space so people that are around me know what to expect and they're not caught off guard because I'm acting in a way that I haven't before. So no one was surprised by my comments. No one was surprised to see the mayor react in the ridiculous way that she did, because we know that's how she responds to me, and people are prepared for that. So I think
Mm.
it's really important to be strategic, know what you're willing to risk, because that will come up in this work. Again, you're trying to create a new world, and people are really embedded in what this world looks like right now. You know what I mean? They have a lot caught up in this world. So it's not going to be easy to convince them to change it. And so they'll come after you with all of the tools and tactics that they have. Media, the positions, careers, like they'll come after all of that. And you have to be honest with yourself about what you can take and what you can't, because it's all up for grabs at this point.
I agree. The biggest thing is just being true to yourself. Somebody asked me, was it earlier this week, like, once I'm elected, will I be outspoken, or or will I try to be something different? I was like, I just told him, like, I'm gonna be me, and if I feel outraged about something or something is affecting my community, I'm going to speak on it. I don't care if it's with the mayor, the city council, whoever. If it's a wrong being done, and I see it, I'm gonna say something about it. And I don't care who it offends, but that's what we need. We can't be stuck in, oh, I'm gonna lose this or that. I mean, maybe for some people that's how they want to respond. But honestly, I mean, I come from nothing. Like, telling me I'm gonna lose something or this is gonna affect me whatever way, it's like, okay, whatever. Like, I could survive it. I've survived this long. So me speaking up for my community and you telling me I'm gonna lose something is really no real effect on me, because you haven't done anything for me but oppress us pretty much anyway.
I mean, I hear you, and I think that's an important piece for people to take away as they think about what their involvement in politics or any risky, decision can be. Like, what am I willing to lose? Like, and have I been through something like this? You know what I mean? Like, I've been homeless in Chicago before, so again, like I know that that was the bottom for me, and nothing the mayor could do to me today can
Right.
compare. So I'm not afraid of those consequences because I've lived a real life. You know what I mean? And so I don't think people should come to politics to hope to be pristine or to hope to cast a certain image, because that's how you get caught up in special interests. That's how you get caught up
Right.
in those negative parts of the work, because you don't have that authenticity to rely on, and you don't have that integrity, and it makes you shakable in a way that people with lived experience and real have had to make tough decisions before, um, don't have those same concerns, because we know we can survive the tough stuff being true to ourselves.
Right. And another piece of that is just not putting yourself on a pedestal or making it seem like Jackeen is perfect or Terrell is perfect. I'm open. I tell you, like, I'm imperfect. Like, I make mistakes all the time, but that doesn't take away from the work that I'm doing. I do my best to be righteous, but I'm also understand that I'm imperfect. I'm human, and I think a lot of times when we from our community, we get leaders and we place them on these high pedestals, and if they do one thing, it's like so and so is a horrible person. It's like he's like that person is human. I mean, if it's wrong, it's wrong, and if it's super foul, it's super foul. But a lot of times, people could just do the most minimal thing, and it's like they started a war or something. It's like, wow.
um, I think you mentioned two things there. Like, the pedestal does only one thing when someone's placed upon it, is it creates a disconnect from the people that they're supposed to be
Yeah.
representing. So I don't think we should be putting anyone on the pedestal, because that limits our exposure and our connection to the person that we had before. No one in office should want to be put on a pedestal or accept a pedestal, because again, it creates that disconnect and that distance from the people that you're supposed to be in community with and representing. And so I think it's up to everyone in that situation to ensure that we're keeping people close. One, because it allows us to hold them accountable in a different way. And two, it allows us to protect them in a different way as well. So that
Right.
we're able to say, like, you don't have to take this bad deal because, like, we're in community and we're supporting you through this tough time, or these tough
Mhm.
decisions that you have to make. And knowing that you're not alone and that you don't represent just yourself. So it's important to create those sense of community, and that's important to do before people enter office, because you have something to hold on to as they go through that journey of candidate into elected official. Um, and then two, like you kind of mentioned it um, tangentially, but like that cancel culture mentality, and what does it mean to say like I'm holding you accountable, but that doesn't make me love you any less. That just means like I I respect you enough to bring you back to reality and to bring you back to a
Right.
grounded state of being, because I know you and I know who you want to be, and what you're doing doesn't represent that. And that doesn't mean like we cast you aside, but again, like it brings you closer to us, because that means you need us more than you did before, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just being willing to take criticism, constructive criticism. I think everybody has to be willing to do that. I think we also like even when people try to like say, "Oh, Terrell, you're a leader." I'm like, "Nope, I'm Terrell. I'm normal. I always go back to nope. I'm normal. I'm a normal person. Don't call me a leader. I don't like the titles. Like I'm Terrell from North Omaha. I'm a community member. That's what I am. Even though I'm running for office, I don't want to be placed in another in a box that I don't want to be placed in. Like I'm from the community. Like I don't ever want to be put in a position to where it disconnects me from where I come from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hear you. Yeah, I think like for me, I don't think about the titles that much either. One, because like it's a gift and a curse, because the title can open you up to a lot of great things and it can also put you in some bad positions. But
Yep.
um, I think it's important that we also respect like the place that we've earned in people's lives as well. Excuse me, and what it means to say like there's a reason they're saying that thing, and so I'm gonna do my best to uphold like that trust that they placed in me. And so like I'll accept the title of leader in that relationship. You know what I mean? And I'll respect the place that they've given me in that relationship, knowing that that doesn't create that same relationship with every person that I'm supposed to be representing. These relationships should be personal and they should be unique depending on what people need for themselves and the things, and I need to be honest about what I need from people as well, and being able to name their place in my life, knowing that I'll need support to be grounded just as much as I'm trying to ground the next person. And so that we're doing that thing for each other, and it feels like a real exchange, because that's what community really offers: an exchange of ideas and energy and love and support, in a real authentic way that these superficial relationships in city offices or partnerships between public and private don't offer. They don't give you that same joy that community organizing can get, or being in community with people can give. And that's why people act so differently in those positions.
Yeah, because even now, like I could go into a room full of people and just sit down, and I won't even bring up that I'm running for office. And people be like, "You crazy? Why don't you tell people that you're, running or who you are?" And I'm like, sometimes I just like to go and listen and see what other people are dealing with. I don't. I think even though I'm running for office, I just feel like it's a time and a place for everything. You don't need to go in every space and stand up and say you're running for office. Sometimes you just need to be there. That's what people want. You don't need to go in and try to take over the conversation or control the room. Sometimes you're just going in and being part of the conversation.
Yeah. And believing that like that community has no deficit. Like there's everything that we need inside of those groups that we create in community. And that my position that I have outside of that isn't the benefit to them, but like my presence and my responsiveness and my trust and my authenticity is the gift because I'm in community with people. There's nothing that we don't have when we build these relationships. And so the titles don't really matter at that point because that's not
Right.
the title I have in community. In community, I'm someone's son. You know what I mean? In community, I'm a cousin or, a co-worker. And so those things don't are closer bonds than what it could mean if I was a congressman and talking to constituents. And so that real genuineness that you have, I believe you should keep that and continue to believe that there's a time and a place, and that your time is coming when it comes to elected office, but community will be here beyond that. You know what I mean? And that's the relationship that we should hold on to.
Definitely. Before we get out of here, again, can you let everyone know what you got coming up as far as your organizing work and how they could get in contact with you?
Yeah, our biggest effort right now is our community canvassing. This is a citywide canvas in honor of Justice for James that communicates to community members the reason we have this cause, what transparency and fair government looks like inside of the criminal justice system, and Don Klein's responsibility to us as our elected official. So our next big event is on Monday, September 7th, which is Labor Day. We're going from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Come at 10 a.m. to get trained and get your packet, and we'll send you off to talk to people door to door with a Justice for James shirt. We are doing what's called deep canvassing, so like 15 to 20-minute conversations that really allow people to change their perspective based on new information. We're doing that on September 7th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Meet us at Culture House at 10 a.m. and you'll get your assignments. And then I'm always here every day to talk about organizing efforts, about demonstration and protest strategy, and to make sure that you're able to organize from a place of power and confidence. And we help you with the resources you need to do that.
Where's the Culture House located?
It's 3014 North 24th Street. That's 24th and Wirt.
Okay, thank you. And again, I thank you all for tuning in. If you want to learn more about me and my campaign, visit our website, peopleforterrellmckinney.com. You can also follow our campaign page, Terrell McKinney LD11, on Facebook. Also have a Twitter handle, T_McKinney 2020. I really enjoy these conversations. I enjoyed the conversation we had tonight, and I look forward to everything you got coming up in the near future. And if I could be a support, just let me know.
I appreciate that. And for anyone listening, Terrell McKinney is an amazing candidate for LD11. He's already gotten Ernie Chambers support, and we're really looking forward to seeing how he shows up to Congress and to the legislature, excuse me. And we really support the work that he's doing in community and find him to be an accessible and really intelligent candidate. So we appreciate your efforts that you've been doing as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we'll see you all again next week. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Jakeem. Have a
You're
good night.
welcome. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.